Hey folks.
Hey Doug.
Good morning. No, good afternoon. Welcome to the Hub. Welcome to our buildings, which we call the Hub, and our faithless works, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Orange. As you can tell, we're a fan of pithy, catchy names. My name is Doug, for those of you who I don't know, or have known. I'm currently the president of our congregation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all. I'm going to ask Molly to come and light our chalice, and I'm going to give a little bit more robust introduction.
Beautiful. Do you want to light the chalice while I read something? Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for being with us. So, we're a Unitarian congregation, and we begin our services by lighting the chalice, which my mom just told me was adopted in World War II to fight Nazism. And so, Doug and I were just visiting some good friends of ours who live in Vermont. I'm pointing at the computer because they're there on Zoom. And we saw the solar eclipse with them in totality. And before we left, Margot gave us copies of this Lakota prayer, which I'm going to read as we light the chalice. Great mystery, teach me how to trust my heart, my mind, my intuition, my inner knowing, the senses of my body, the blessings of my spirit. Teach me to trust these things so that I may enter my sacred space and love beyond my fear, and thus walk in balance with the passing of each glorious sun.
Thank you, Mindy and Molly. Thanks, Margot.
Dude, thank you.
Okay, so, thanks so much. Welcome to our April Faith Plus Works talk. Let me give a little bit of background on what we're doing here, for those of you who it's your first time. So, these are our 135-year-old congregational buildings, built in the 1890s, and about 8 years ago, facing decades of deferred maintenance and a very shrinking congregation, and therefore shrinking capacity to keep the buildings maintained and functional, our congregation faced a decision to sell our land, probably to develop and merge with a larger suburban congregation, the one in Montclair, for example, or to do something else. And so under the leadership of several folks in the congregation, including Frank and Mindy, who are here, and Darcy, who's on Zoom, we decided to instead live up to what it means to be a 135-year-old anchor institution in a city like Orange, and to open our doors and to put the now 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism into practice. You may have noticed coming in, we have these big signs that say faith and works. It's not faith works, it's faith plus works, coming from this idea. There's a sentiment in the book of Matthew, I think, that faith without works is dead. So our congregation is dying. So we decided to start an organization called The Hub, which is a fully independent organization that runs these spaces, a very active community center. We have offices, and we offer offices and program space to the University of Orange, which is a free people school here in Orange, New Jersey, to Lambie Center for Civics and Humanities. We do Ysabel and immigration services for Asian American community in Orange, and the Laundry Workers Center, which is sort of an offshoot in a way of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, that are organizing with domestic workers, in particular workers in New Jersey and New York. And the spaces are also used for all sorts of parties and gatherings, organizing meetings, trainings, poetry readings, book launches, more on that later. Anyway, so, so, the Hub, the work side of things is doing very well. There's a lot of it. It's exhausting to keep up with, but I think quite proud of the track record that we had at this moment in time. So the question became, what becomes of the faith side of things? What is the role of our now lay-led congregation? We used a lot of our resources 9 years ago to invest in getting the Hub started instead of having a minister or something like that. So since 2018, we've been hosting these Faith Plus Work services where we invite artists, activists, friends, neighbors, actors, teachers, etc., to speak about how they live their faith in their work, whatever that means to them. And we've learned a lot, and we've come to recognize the crucial importance of this ritual to the work that we're doing, and what one of our associated reverends, Dr. Edgar Rivera Colon, calls our collective discernment of the spirit. So, with that said, this month is Poetry Month, and I'm very excited to welcome both Kathy and Ysabel to give our Faith Plus Works talk. Kathy I've known for 20 years, give or take. Kathy was my English high school teacher. Yeah, I would still remember it was sort of my junior year when we were covering for Salvos.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of the first year I was like, oh, like, here's a teacher who's actually reading an essay I've wrote and is concerned about what I've written, not just how wide my margins are or spelling errors. And it was sort of a revelation and something that helped to sort of connect my sort of errant love of learning with the sort of school that I was in, which prior to that hadn't really existed. And then Ysabel, we've only known each other for a few times, but has been very engaged at various points and interested in the work we're doing here at the Hub. We've got some exciting potential collaborations coming up soon. Anyway, both wonderful poets. So because it's Poetry Month, and well, I always read a poem for our sort of opening, welcoming words, but I picked today to kick us off a poem by Robinson Jeffers called To the Stone Cutters, which I think speaks to the importance of poetry in general. So, stone cutters, fighting time with marble, you four defeated challengers of oblivion. Eat cynical earnings, knowing rock splits, records fall down, the square-limbed Roman letters scale in the thaws, wear in the rain. The poet as well builds his monument mocking thee, for man will be blotted out. The blithe earth die, the brave sun die blind and blackened to the heart. Yet stones have stood for 1,000 years, and pained thoughts found the honey of peace in old poems. So with that, Kathy Kremins and Ysabel González.
Hug. Sorry, hug.
Oh.
I thought.
Yeah.
There we go. I want to. Thank you. I love that poem. That's a beautiful poem, and also the opening prayer. Oh my God, I would love a copy of that if possible. And we also have a little short excerpt that we'd like to open with before we start our conversation. Our conversation is going to be focused on love, liberation, and friendship. So I'm very excited to talk with my dear friend Kathy. And so we're going to open with an excerpt of an essay by Audre Lorde. And the essay is called The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. And this is just after she had been diagnosed with cancer, and she's sort of grappling with that and also calling on her sisters, calling on her community. So the excerpt reads, I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. But for every real word spoken, for every attempt I had ever made to speak those truths for which I am still seeking, I had made contact with other women while we examined the words to fit into a world in which we all believed, bridging our differences. And it was the concern and caring of all those women which gave me strength and enabled me to scrutinize the essentials of my living. The women who sustained me through that period were Black and white, old and young, lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual, and we all shared a war against the tyrannies of silence. They all gave me a strength and concern without which I could not have survived intact. Within those weeks of acute fear came the knowledge. Within the war we are all waging with the forces of death, subtle and otherwise, conscious or not, I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior. What are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence? Perhaps for some of you here today, I am the face of one of your fears, because I am woman, because I am Black, because I am lesbian, because I am myself, a Black woman warrior poet doing my work. Come to ask you, are you doing yours? So that's, I guess, an entrance into this conversation that we're having today. And I think Kathy and I wanted to start with sort of our origin story. And it's so fantastic, I'm gonna get all teary-eyed, but it's so fantastic that our friend Marina's in the audience with us, because she's the person who pulled us together. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Kathy to continue the story.
So Marina, who's responsible for so many things, just as the pandemic was beginning and things were shutting down, realized that we were going to need community. And so what Marina did, because Marina has community, because Marina puts herself out there, Marina does the work, she reached out to some of her friends and people who didn't necessarily know each other. And we became this collective. But more than that, we became family. And we lived through the pandemic together, mostly on Zoom. Every so often we, put our masks on and gather. It's outside. But it sustained us. And again, that's the work that we do. Much of that, in terms of it, speaking personally, what I've done in these past few years have come directly from Marina gathering us all together. And for me, some of the best parts of it was the homework that Ysi and Marina would give. They're like, "You're gonna write this poem." I'm like, "Okay, I will write that poem."
Because we should mention that the group that was pulled together, they were all women and they were all poets.
Mm-hmm.
So that we shared all that in common.
Right.
So that was like the rooting of this. Marina called on her poet women warriors and pulled us together, and that has sustained us through COVID, and also continue to move us into this space where Kathy and I are, we're very special friends, and I really feel like the topic today, love, liberation, friendship, the power of poetry rooted in friendship and rooted in love is so powerful, and I really think that it can change. It can change the world, and I think there are examples of women like Audre Lorde, who I brought into the space because I feel like she's a great example of someone who used love, and also she was a fierce activist and poet. She used both to move us to be our best selves in terms of humanity. And I know we have some poems that we're also going to read interspersed between our conversation. Kathy, do you wanna?
Yeah, I think just one last thing, because we're joyfully shouting out Marina, who's going to give us grief after this, but we're right on Poetry Babes is the collective, the feminist collective, and I mean, collectives are how we get things done. That is the in my mind the best way to love each other is to form collectives and merge collectives and break collectives up and create other collectives. And as I sit here with a dear friend of multi-decades whom I coached team sports with for a very long time, that's what it's about. If we have had success in our lives, it's because of convincing kids to come together and love each other, and you do that, and good things are gonna happen. You know, so write on Poetry Babes, Feminist Collective, thank you, Marina, and more importantly for the family that you've created, so origin stories. So part of what we would do during the pandemic is have prompts, and we would write these poems and we would share them with each other. Ysabel, the ancestors are so critical and so important to all of us, and Ysabel really brought that into our conversation at a time that I think we all really needed it, especially. And so the writing of the origin poems came from Ysy.
That was my challenge.
That's what you made me do. You made me write an origin poem. That's what happened.
Do you want me to start?
You start,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll kick us off. So this is an origin, it's just called Origins, and basically thinking about my ancestral lineage, thinking about my mother's mother who my mother's mother passed away in 2012, but she's still a great part of my life. I have an altar with her, she's up there, she's very significant to me. And basically this is sort of an origin story of where I came from and how the women I've encountered have supported me throughout and lifted me up. Origins. Lucia, purveyor of ripe mangoes, overseer of rivers, begot Hilda, priestess, dreamer, whisperer, gem keeper, who begot her only daughter. Named for royalty, I've been a slave to invention, newness, unyielding boxes holding a body which I'll never get back. Young woman I wish I could claim, but never owned. This is her beauty, infinite, reckless, spiritualist, in love with a God that's been kind. The young woman was once a girl, friendless but loved by her mother and father like an animal who mouths their cub by the scruffy neck. The girl did not know how to dress. The girl did not know how to comb her hair. That is the price you pay for loving pages in a book. You live messily. But the girl knew other things, Disney and radio songs, and a bird in a pink cage that hissed through his bars. She loved creating and storing alternate versions of stories in her brain, like that time during recess when the schoolboy walked up concrete steps leading inside, leaned over and spit on her puffy coat. It was such a cold day. Couldn't the white have been snow on her shoulder? And what of the way she walked, hunched, hoping she would crumple, her body disappearing into smallness, whiteness, plainness. She imagined all the ways she could save her body from being looked at, eyed, devoured. She knew too young how a body could get a woman in trouble. It's my fault for constructing myself this way, was the pervasive thought echoing in her little girl brain. The girl, the young woman, forgives herself and is hopeful, like Disney, like radio songs, but not like the hissing bird. The woman now is forgetful, remembers how to create, but forgets how to love her body. Men used her to feel alive, and she allowed it because her mother's advice about love was garbled, words on the tip of her tongue she can't quite recall. She decides this is the end and surrounds herself with women who love her, guide her, pick her up and instruct her to be patient until she can hear the music again, the words again, trust her body again, hear her mother. She does, it's glorious, and everything you'd imagine. Angels, iridescent wings flapping, the earth rotating more quickly, and even, yes, soft kittens purring on a pillow. It is raucous, it is peace. Origins should never be taken lightly. They feed the ego or starve it, creating a woman boundless or shackled, sometimes somewhere in the middle. I was born to warrior women, but had to learn it all again. The same lesson over and over, like Caribbean water rushing in on sand, drawing back to reveal creatures hiding in their shells. When I evoke my start, I taste salt. It calms me. I taste power too, rough boulders washed over by ocean, instructing me to be formidable, believe in their rocky boldness. This origin is for you, the believer, the rebel, the odd woman out. Maybe yours is a little like mine, daughter of a goddess, birthed with a bit of fire flickering from the eyes, unsure of how to use the flame.
I never tire of listening to Ysi read her poems. And I think the other thing that I love so much is how we've come to know each other's poems. You know, many of these poems are poems that we've read to each other and we've listened and we've talked to each other about. And again, it's community,
Yeah.
right?
And that poem came out of our collective.
Yeah.
When we're,
Yeah. And
I was thinking of you all when
yeah.
I wrote it.
Yeah, and just that joy, you know.
Yeah.
My origin poem, I am a Newark kid, grew up in Newark, and I went to high school at Marylawn, which is now Orange Technology High School, and one of my closest friends lived in Orange, spent a lot of time on Ridge Street, and when I was old enough, a lot of time drinking in bars too, in Orange. So this is very, I feel very much home. This is homeland for me. And my origin poem goes to a number of things that I often write about. And while I'm looking for this, because look at me, the cool kid, I'm actually going to read from my phone. This is what I'm showing you here is not necessarily the book, but this cover art, which was done by Marina, who took a photograph of my mom and I. I'm about 3 here, and it was in front of Sacred Heart Cathedral, and Broad Market Street, which I spent many a time in Newark waiting for a bus at Broad Market with my mother, and it's just a beautiful memory for me all the time. And Marina also very kindly gave me a piece of artwork, so it sits in my writing spaces as inspiration. So here's my origin poem. Newark Museum once a month, first stop, the Lenné Lenape exhibit, lost for hours in your stories of grand people. Reminded that we live on stolen land, mesmerized and memorizing the ceramics, clothing, and weapons, and jewelry, and pelts. Dioramas of a village without white killers, without missionaries, without disease and death. Next stop, 2 seats in McGovern's bar, beers for you, a sugary Coke for me. Tales of the warrior Queen Maeve, the Hill of Tara, and invaders from Britain. The famine skeletons haunting friends, starving themselves in May's prison. The sticky floor under my feet, a mix of blood and booze, natives of broken lands. And I suppose, again, speaking of Audre Lorde, the personal is political, and I feel like that I'm never far from that, and certainly when I think about my father, and both my parents were immigrants from Ireland, and so there's that deep connection, and certainly to put it in context of the world now, we all have work to do. We all have work to do.
I love that I could see all the both places so clearly. Like the imagery was so vibrant. I could picture the whole story that you were telling. And something that I neglected to mention is I'm also a native Newarker. So like the Newark Museum was like my home.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
right, we lived there, and the
yeah.
library,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this idea of like tying, how we tie what we're writing naturally about our identity to the political. I feel like it's so for you and I, it's very they're tied together. There's no difference. The personal is political, and I would dare say for many a poet, that's true. There's always something laced in there that is very raucous making. But also, you know what I love too about your poems, Kathy, is that there are subtle hints of humor, which is very, very, if you've read poems, it's very hard to do, like naturally. Some people try too hard, but Kathy does such a good job at like telling the story, but through that lens where it allows you to be in her shoes. And also there are just moments of like, I just always think of the church poem, the car
church raffle.
Yes,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's one of my favorite poems. And it's like it's how quickly you go from like making someone laugh to making someone like take notice, which is a great like craft tool actually, to be able to make someone laugh and then also within the next moment bring, you know, a very sobering moment where you're like, whoa, this is actually very heavy. But it also is an opportunity to help people enter into the poem, which I think is important. I find that, and I think you and I, and Marina also does a great job at making poetry very accessible. I find that not necessarily younger generation, because they're phenomenal at entering poetry and putting on IG and just like going all, you know, guns blazing. But my generation, I think older, has a harder time because with poetry, that the relationship with poetry, because of this idea of wanting to get the poem right and wanting to understand the poem and all the technicalities of the poem. And there's also the old school tradition of teaching the white canon, which can be sometimes undo someone's excitement for poetry. And there's such, I just want to say, just real quick, like there's such contemporary poets beyond Marina, Kathy, myself. There are so many people writing on amazing topics that are very accessible, very relatable, very, if you want names, I can totally give them to you, because poetry is making, I want to say making a comeback, but it's like the LL Cool J line. I've been here for years, so like it's, you know, it's always been there. It's always been a tool, I think, but now it's really I think an accessible tool. And now contemporary poets have been able to find a seat at the table, which is wonderful, because it used to be just for the elite and for the academics. But now it's really anyone can find a seat at the table for poetry. I think that's really important to our conversation, because I think, you know, after we read some poems and open it up, you know, it's a challenge for you all to think about how you can enter into poetry, how you can use it as a tool in your own life, or for advocacy or activism. I think there's so many ways to engage with poetry.
Yeah, and you know, listening to Izzy, which I can just do, you know, I'd be totally fine for Izzy to continue. Yes, if you need poets' names, that's your person right there. And I two other pieces. The first piece, just talking about humor. I was really blessed with a father who seriously had to be like part leprechaun. I'm pretty sure of that. And the ability to feel sorrow and feel pain and to feel other people's suffering, and to also embrace joy and love and friendship and to give of oneself without, you know, like worrying about getting something back. I also think the great joy of my life was to be able to do something that somebody paid me for. Thank you, taxpayers of the state of New Jersey. And to be a teacher 33 years in public schools and more in terms of university teaching. But having to, entertain high school students and keep them interested, yeah, I need, if I didn't bring humor in, nobody was going to pay attention to me for too long. So there was a performance piece to it, and so I think I learned how to use some humor to wake them up, even so the funny part, having had both Bethany and Doug in class, and Doug I had multiple classrooms. The very funny part is I can tell you exactly what classroom I was in and where they sat. It's pretty amazing. Robin's like, oh, yep, same. And the other piece is, I will receive my Medicare card and probably the copy of my debut poetry collection the same day. It's probably going to happen at the same day. So especially for young poets, and by young poets, I'm talking anybody under 50. Right? So this is your moment, and what I hope is that in some way I can be a part of that. That, like, whatever timeline people tell you you're on, or how you have to live your life, or what, forget about it. It's going to go the way you live it and how you embrace it, and our lives are made up of these moments that we live. And if you love writing and you love poetry, then write, poet, play music, sing, dance, do all of those things. And at some point, if you want to have a book, you know what? You'll have a book. You'll get a book. It'll happen. But you don't, as Izzy said, this idea of you have to get it right, you have to be perfect. No, you don't. Because that's just going to create, then you're not going to get things done, and you're not going to make the connections that enrich you. You have to be vulnerable. In every single moment, you have to be vulnerable in order to be open, and you have to be open and vulnerable in order to write. And poetry, what that means, what you think it might mean, invent it. Invent it. It's a very open definition. Are there stanzas? Maybe. Are there lines? Maybe. Are there metaphors? Maybe. Go for it.
And I'll also add to this idea that I think not only as writers, but also as appreciators of poetry, because I think also, I don't necessarily think that we're calling on each of you to write the poem, unless you need to write the poem or want to write the poem, but also there's this opportunity, I think, for us as a community, as a humanity, to appreciate poetry again, and find language that serves us, find language that empowers us. Sometimes it's just listening to another poet or another writer, and I think what you're saying too, Kathy, is this idea of for pleasure, for joy. We're often made to find what we have to understand the poem, or we have to write the sonnet, and it's like, well, there's also this idea of when you find pleasure, that also can balance out your life in a certain respect, and you find some very peaceful moments in life when you're indulging in the arts, when you're indulging in other opportunities to find yourself some fulfillment, I think, which I think is a good segue too into using poetry to love each other better, to find ways to love each other better. And yes, as friends, but also as strangers, I think there's opportunities for us to come together and use language for empathy, use poetry for empathy, and for creating these opportunities to have really deep, lively discussions on things that sometimes are hard to talk about. And I just want to say here, I was over at Kathy's the other day, and I just left so fulfilled with, yes, poetry. Kathy let me a book, and I was like, yeah. But also like just like finding spaces in our lives to really find some joy with each other. There's so much really happening, as always with life. There's so much happening that's so deeply disturbing. And it's like, how do we live to fight another day? We have to replenish. We have to fill the cup and find spaces. I know it's always hard to be like, oh, I don't, like, this whole idea of poetry is not a luxury, right? And it's not. Like, this idea of we need it to sustain ourselves. And instead of seeing it as an add-on, a plus, an additive, an option, like, how do we change our communities to see it as it's part of our community development, our relationship building, our engagement with empathy, and how do we use it as a tool for that, and refilling our cup and finding peace, and then we become better humans, is what I think.
Read me a love poem.
Funny you should ask. So this poem is about loving of community, loving of women around me. It hasn't found its way into any books yet, but it's a poem that I hope you will all enjoy. It's called "Women Like Me Want a Brightly Lit Altar." Carnation petals floating on the tops of water in jars, fragrantly filling the air. But I don't want to be worshipped, no, just remembered, for speaking loud-lipped and brazen, boldly stating truths despite the consequences. Leave me half-eaten strawberries, pools of rose water, framed photos of Audre Lorde and Frida Kahlo standing tall before candles, fiery and fierce. I want to be the ancestor that learns spells, conjures ways to bend light years, flip hourglasses, a goddess altering time, warping it so that women like me rewrite history, etch new stories into textbooks, engrave legacies, live out our dreams as powerhouses, ensuring the future is female. I want to be that ancestor that talked a big talk, but walked an even wider step, machete in hand, carving paths through green, so other women, black and brown, can step through more easily, sure-footed and confident, at the ready to rabble-rouse and lead a revolution. I want to be the ancestor that knows, too, when it's time to rest, and when it's time to laugh. In the midst of carrying heavy weight, and even when tomorrow looks dire and bleak, this cannot and will not shadow our joy, our shine, which we carry profoundly, earnestly. I want to be the kind of ancestor that thinks about the future, leaves this earth greener, a world restored that pulses and thrums for the next generation of women who fight, who resist, who insist, who make demands, and who will lead us into better days. You see, women like me want a brightly lit altar to light passageways, prayers up for imminent change, laying in the promised palms of our daughters.
I'm gonna read two shorter poems. Of course, I had all these, like, I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna read this, and as I expected, Izzy's changing my mind, so. I'm going to read two poems, one which is a very new poem. I'm supposed to be doing all of these other things, and the way I distract myself and procrastinate is I write poems, which doesn't always happen, but okay. And it's a poem about, so Jane, speaking of poets to recommend, Jane, I've been reading a lot of Jane Hirschfield recently, and she is trained in Zen Soto Buddhism, and I've been on at least over a decade, but in particular the last 5 years, really working with meditation. I have a fantastic meditation teacher, Jean Vitrano, in Maplewood. And, it's been very important to me in terms of balance and centering and connecting to the suffering of others in a way sometimes that's quiet. I can be very loud and political. But sometimes there's other ways to be. And the first poem, which is the newer poem, I recently read, I'm reading Jane Hirschfield's collected works, but also poets.org had put out an older poem of hers called Vinegar and Oil. And I'm always surprised, I guess, which I shouldn't be. I always think, okay, lady, you're getting your Medicare card and all of the things that come with that. And I'm always like, okay, I have so many people in my life. I have such a rich, beautiful, gorgeous life with all of these people, and I can't bring any more people into my life. And yeah, okay, I know it's like me with animals. You're never gonna rescue another animal, ever. It's not gonna happen. And so thinking about the beauty of that, I think I don't have enough love, and I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough space. And we do. And so this is a poem which is after Jane Hirschfield's Vinegar and Oil, and it's for my friend Amy. And
I wanted to find the poem.
Yes.
I just want shout outs to June 1st, where we're having Kathy's book launch party right here in this space. So it's going to be awesome. And thank you for allowing us to have that space there for community and to celebrate Kathy. And I just want to ask this question. And so you have now, how many collections, I gotta know, how many collections do you have and what was the time frame?
So, well, I had academic books.
Yes, but I mean the poetry.
The poetry stuff. Undressing the World came out in 2021? Yes. No, 20. I've totally, 20, was it 2021?
I think so, that sounds right.
2021.
And then the chapbook.
And then this is Seamus and His Smalls, speaking of rescuing. Well, the Smalls rescued me, but I rescued Seamus. And now he rescued me too. So this was 2023. Yeah, and now 2024 will be the curve of things. So, well, thank you for kicking my butt and making it all happen. As I always say, I write poems, and my poetry family, they're like, no, you're a poet. I'm like, I write poems, like I don't write books. Now I can't say that anymore, so they're just constantly giving me grief. Yeah. I also think what I'm going to do is frame my Medicare card, and we'll put it on the piano for the book launch, because I'm just feeling like that's important, right? Okay, so this is a poem called Water and Air for Amy. Rough presence airs the heart, tender presence waters it. How light we are with good company, giving and receiving unnoticed, surprised by providence, like the sunrise photograph of a half-frozen lake above a bed unmade. And the other poem is, again, this idea, right, of love and friendship. Part of what I think about are those days during the pandemic. We would spend a lot of time on Zoom and a lot of poetry things, and but every so often we would meet outside, and we'd go to a park, and Marina was also great at like organizing readings out in parks, and the kids could come and play, and just that joy in the midst of incredible challenges. And a number of years ago, I had this line that kept running through my head, and again, this idea of poets. I do a lot of writing in my head before I ever put anything, and I still write everything longhand to start. But you know, you get something in your head, and so I had in my head this line, on the brink of everything, on the brink of everything, on the brink of everything. And it, you know, it was a time in my life where I was trying to decide, like, do I stay in this, I was living in South Orange at the point, do I stay in this area? Like, you know, I'm great at changing my life. Robin's like, oh yeah, how many changes was that over 30-something years? And, you know, like, just thinking about that and walking through, I call it Cameron Field because that's what we called it back in the 70s. Although now it's Meadowlands Park. And this happened, you know, nature happens. It's happening all the time. And you talk about love and friendship, that nature's part of that. You know, very, very much a part of that. And so this is a poem called On the Brink of Everything. I walked so many miles with this poem hanging in the balance of finding the words or dying the cruel death of the unsaid, unuttered. Then the bird appeared, the red-winged blackbird, swaying on the thin branch framed against the blue-bird, egg-colored sky. And I finally understood the ordinary devotion to things loved, to living on the brink of everything, teetering on the precarious line of fear and joy, the everyday of awe.
It's so appropriate for this conversation.
Right?
I wasn't gonna read that. And so I know we want to create space for conversation. Maybe we'll just close with if you have one more poem.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yep.
Before we read our poems, is there anything else that you think that you want to lift up from this conversation?
I'm looking up. I'm sure my mom's there. I'm not quite sure where Dad might be. My mother was a very devout Catholic who believed my father came back reincarnated as a cardinal, but that's beside the point. And then my dad, who as he always said, he goes, I am a pagan Irish Catholic. He was a pagan, but he included the Irish Catholic because of my mother as a nod. But this space very much feels like home, and for a lot of reasons. You know, for the people who are here and there, and just what spaces like this mean, community spaces, because that's what a church is, right? It's a community space where we come together and we love each other, and for that time that we're together, we enjoy, and we tend and we care.
And I would reflect by saying, I wonder how we can use more arts tools in these spaces to gather, like Doug, how you read the poem at the beginning. You said, I think you read some poems at some of the opening spaces. And I love that idea, like how do we create more opportunities where we can include poems, whether they're for resist, joy, humor. There's so many kinds of ways to include poetry in these gatherings. It's something that I'm thinking about in my professional life, and I'm now working more closely with Newark, and there's a thriving arts community there, and there's a thriving poetry community there, and how do we create more opportunities where it's not an echo chamber, poets speaking to poets, but actually poetry finding its way into all kinds of spaces. I'm very interested in that. And so I'll just close with this poem, and it's a very special poem because Kathy and I went away on retreat. Maybe this is like 2 years ago? Maybe?
Yeah, 2.5 years
That's
ago.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
2.5 years ago, so Kathy's been great that we have this space that her family has up in upstate New York, and we gather as the Write On Poetry Babes, and we make a whole weekend and turn it into a writing opportunity, and spending time with each other. Anyway, so that at this point 2 years ago, the other babes couldn't make it, so it was just Kathy and I. And we had created an itinerary and everything.
You created the itinerary. No one in this audience would believe that I created an itinerary.
Let's be honest about this. So we were in the car together, you were driving, and I had this conversation with Kathy that I was like, it was a real woman to woman conversation, and whatever that means. But I just discovered some things that I was like, oh, there's something bubbling here. And when we got to the retreat, to the house, I wrote this poem, and now it's the title piece for my next book that I'm working on. It's called Sing This Body Out, and it's just crazy how that happened. And I give so much thanks to Kathy, because you created a space for me where I felt like I could be vulnerable, like what you were talking about earlier. I could be honest, I could be open, I could be myself, and be very, very I think tender to the person I'm talking to in this poem, because I feel like it was the babes I was talking to, but also tender to myself. So it's called Sing This Body Out, and it's the closing title poem in my next collection that I'm working on. Sing this body out. Dear reader, when I'm invited to help heal another woman's body, it feels velvet, smooth, wrapping itself over my thighs, soft, pushing me out of this house into a darkly lit club, karaoke night with the girls. We sing about our lovers we've left hanging, but also hold high notes about our irregular menstrual flow, the mammograms where bunches of skin fold underneath itself. We carry melodies, woes of our aging bodies. Oh, the sag of a half note, wrinkled, worn out triplet. Did you know our body's prime lies in changing, gravity pulling at the seams, pulsing blood growing wiser, richer? I bet you can even feel it now as you read this, as you hear this, the body always missing and longing for something it doesn't have yet, but at the same time remarkably proud of all the ways it is able. I want to place my beauty-marked hand over yours, tell you the secret way achy bones draw my body down, prevent me from making love the way I used to. The body is deceiving, but I'm not wistful for my younger self. No, because I'd have to do it all over again, understanding limits, discovering what is and isn't possible. I am the old knotted tree, and there is pleasure in communing with others like me, singing our deepest throb, wondering why the universe proposed we travel this way through the world. I say, this hurts. Dear friend, you say, me too, and I am reflected back. I remember the day I got my first period, the way Lily and I giggled at the book my mother gave me about how young women's bodies worked. Two stretching teens learning about the ways we could change, be more. Dearest reader, how you would have laughed and laughed at our tiny faces. Don't worry, one day I will have the chance to curl up next to you, learn what's changing in your landscape, and we can laugh together. I've always wanted to ask you, how do your limbs feel in this very moment? Tired? Strong? I want to stretch across this page and honor whatever may not move in the same way for you, and what has never moved. Praised be to the spirit of our eyes, for that never changes. I say, dear reader, I love you with just one deep look, and I do. I love the way you listen, patient as I sing this body out.
What I love about that poem, which I closed my eyes, is that the conversation in the car.
Yes,
that like
right?
I'm hearing
That was what it was.
like the talking about the book and yeah, and then to for us to get there and Izzy's working on this, and all of a sudden, there's this poem that incorporates this very personal, vulnerable conversation that we had, and it's just, yeah, I can never get enough of that.
Yeah.
And your voice, and you know, that's the other, that other beautiful part about being part of community. Like, I can, you know, grab, you know, Izzy's book, and I hear her voice when I read those poems. I can grab Marina's books, and Tamara, and Lynn, you know, Claudia, and Griselle, and Paula, like, and I can hear their voices. Now, we don't all see each other very often. There's a core of us that see each other more often, but I get to carry their voices in my head, and my heart, and my soul. Like, how great is that? Like, that's just amazing. And hopefully out of all of this is, and I'm hoping this final poem that I'm going to read does that, is we gotta talk to each other. We have to have conversations, and not the easy conversations or the fun conversations. They're gonna happen, but we have to have the hard conversations. We have to listen. We have to be uncomfortable, because we got each other, and the animals, and Mother Nature, but we have to listen. And that's as hard as that might be sometimes. So I'm going to end with, it's in here somewhere. You'll also know there's a whole lot of my dad going on here today. Again, unplanned, but he does show up. And a lot of like Irish things happening too. Unplanned.
Like what? What do you mean, like?
Well, you know, like in McGovern's, like that, and then here, this has to do with
the poems.
Yeah, the poems, yeah. So this poem came out of one of the things that I decided to do during the pandemic. You know, my parents were Irish immigrants, and you know, they grew up at a time when you were not allowed to speak Irish in Ireland. And so my father couldn't speak any Irish, and my mother could only say her prayers in Irish. And I felt, as many of the younger Irish people are feeling, like we gotta save this language, like we're gonna lose it. And so it's really hard, I keep stopping. But I was taking a couple of classes and really working on that, and also thinking about, you know, the words that we have and don't have in you know, the difference between you know, Irish and English, just as it exists with other languages, and also sometimes how you know, we argue about language in a way that really think about it, it's pretty silly, because there are certain words that are really what's most important and most critical. So anyway, this is the one problem. If I were younger, I would have figured out how not to lose that poem as my phone timed out. And I have all these young friends. Where are you helping me right now? No, there they are. They're just wait. I gotta ask for help. Yeah. All right. So the poem is called "What Kind of Chat?" Been thinking about language, what structures of diction, syntax, grammar, punctuation control how we touch with words. Learning Irish, finally freed from the forbidden my parents endured, colonized education left for dead, but rising up as the people themselves keep doing. Verb-driven actions precede subject, precede object. Imagine a world without yes or no. What kind of chat begins with such useless little words, too polarizing, too stagnant, isolated from the heart? The banter needed to start the grand old conversation. A response followed by a few questions, or better, a story bursting with ancestors. Imagine a land where our tongues weave an agam, for we are all poets, unbound, unleashed spring tides, they, them, us, we.
I guess we could just close with, you know, bringing voices into the space. If anyone has maybe some thoughts and part, you know, as part of the conversation, or poets that you're reading, or thoughts on how we can bring poetry into communities, or I'm just curious what everyone's thinking about right now after this conversation.
It was wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
So generous. What I've been thinking about for the past day is I had the opportunity to go to the Met yesterday to see the Harlem Renaissance exhibit. And when I was a college student, I had a summer job reading the columns that Dr. W.B. Du Bois wrote in The Crisis, like all of the columns. And he was always talking about these artists. And what has really just been on my heart is imagine knowing all that work in 1920 or 1930 and not being able to get the world to look. And I just, for me, like thinking about that exhibit, how stunning it was, how amazing, and that the world wouldn't look.
Yeah.
So I so appreciate what you're doing because it's a way of help. At least we have to put it out there.
Yeah.
And then the world will look when it's ready. I hope everybody goes to see that exhibit.
And let people choose, right? Because the idea of Vine is creating spaces for opportunity to share this wealth, and then let them decide if they want to participate or not. There should be more. I love this idea of more spaces where we can talk about this and introduce each other to what we're reading, what we're learning, who's out there, the information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe you have me thinking now about Faith Ringgold, who just passed away, and you know, I'm grateful that now people recognize her name, but you know, how many decades of work, unbelievable work in so many different ways that she did. And as I think about that, you know, I'm thinking about a younger artist, Bisa Butler. I don't know if you're familiar with Bisa, but if you're not, check her work out, because her work is phenomenal. She had been an art teacher at Columbia High School in South Orange, and her work is just truly phenomenal. And I think where I'm going with this is I think about one of the things that helped her was the good use of social media. You know, right? That we have tools that can be used for evil. I'm not going to say any names, but also to use those tools for beauty, however you want to define beauty. But yeah.
There's somebody else too, when I was reading about the artist that just passed, who comes to our Dodge Poetry Festival every year. Her name is Gail Mitchell, and she actually for years, she does quilt making, and so the patchwork, and so she would take patches and have the poets sign their names on the patch, and then she would weave it all together. She's got like historic quilts, like with signatures from people who have long passed.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like somehow we have to find a way to like showcase that.
Yeah.
Isn't that like
That's incredible.
history?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's from the Trenton area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Quilting is a lot like poetry too, where it's like a lot of reference,
Yeah.
you know? There's a lot of conversation reaching back
I love
and
that.
around to like people that are also doing quilt work.
Yeah.
And like where the patterns come from, or like where, you know, kind of the base blocks come from, and then the outgrowths of that. So I feel like there are like some similarities in how the craft works between people.
I love that, like also paying homage, like historically, who has, I love this idea, again, coming back to Mindy's point, like this idea of sharing knowledge and how do you pass down information or craft or, there's just so much, especially, I think of the indigenous population, how they're trying to keep their language alive right now and document all the language. Like Natalie Diaz, a big poet that we know, is doing a lot of work in Arizona on her res to document language and because the elders are passing and that's dying with them. So how important that is to, like you said, what did you say? Call back?
It's like a reference.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And I also think, and this is something that I feel we're very good at as a collective, and certainly also as family friends, is shouting each other out. You know, people are doing lots of things, and so we're trying. You know, it's important. Like, I might not be able to make it, but I want other people to know, and if you can do it, go to it. Speaking of that, Saturday, June 8th, a book that has meant, now I've read all of Mindy's books, but as a child of Newark and Route 280, I got poems about it. Root Shock, and if you've not read Root Shock, read Root Shock, show up on, I can't be here because I'm gonna be up with Cheryl Clark and friends. We're gonna be up in Hobart that weekend, but again, those are like things that mean something to you and have moved you and are important to you. Like, lift people up and shout them out. We're just gonna be better for it.
Agreed.
So how long have we been doing Faith and Works? I don't know. Are we thinking it's like
5, 6 years?
yeah, so we've been doing this like
2
6
years.
years,
Yeah.
usually like once a month,
After-
September to May, and so I'm just like so struck that we've all of our speakers, it's always been, I think it's always been one person, and it's very beautiful. I mean, we've always gained so much from hearing people sort of reflect on this question of faith and work, but it's such a joy to see you both doing this together because it's such a reminder of how we don't make our work alone and we don't make sense of our world alone and we don't engage with our faith alone. So thank you so much for that. And it's a, you know, I think it's so interesting in the context of poetry because it's another one of those things that you picture just like someone alone. So it's such a beautiful reminder that, you know, obviously part of it is these conversations with yourself, but it's not about like that it's just you, it's dynamic, so it's so beautiful.
I appreciate that because I was just on a panel, literally like this, like Thursday, and they asked the question about collaboration for poets, and I said, you know, it's really interesting because there's some poets who literally collaborate, and we've done a collaborative poem together, but more so, I think some of the best writers are in conversation with each other, whether it's the callbacks or literally having conversations with each other about the work, about the activating spaces, about serving our communities. We're constantly in conversation with each other, which builds, you're always, for me, I've always said, you're always writing a poem in your body, at least, like Kathy, like you're writing the poem, maybe not on the page, but as you have those conversations, you're writing the poem. You may not realize it. You have to live life in order to write the poem, I think. You can't be holed up in a room, really. So I think I love this idea of like, you're right, it's not often that you see poets collaborating, so I appreciate that space for us to talk about how we do work together. Yeah.
I appreciated your reference to this space and what this space does when people come together. And so a couple of years ago, we applied for state and historic recognition for this building. And so part of the application is not only the architecture and the design of the building, but it's also the people who came here and who did things here. And we were rejected. We were told that, well, you know, the architecture's kind of simple, it's not anything unique. And the people like George Merck, who started Merck Pharmaceutical, and some of the suffragettes who were part of this congregation generations ago are important, but the work that they did and what they're known for happened outside of this place. And I couldn't help but think, you know, if they came here, if this was part of their lives, then who's to say that what they did here didn't influence what they ultimately achieved?
Yeah.
And I think we have to reapply for this.
I think so too, and we have to
Yes.
explain to them that works without faith is dead.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely reapply. If you need help, you got people who can write.
Okay.
We didn't write.
Right.
You know,
That would be.
not that you can't write, but but that's the other, like, you know, we get really good at like, ooh, all right, let's see, how are we gonna spin this? You know, but, I mean, like, I'm sitting here looking at those 3 windows, and like, there's a whole lot of conversation in my head right now, and it's not us, you know, that's happening in this space.
Yeah, we have a beautiful
Moving
Tiffany
through.
window in that other room.
Yeah,
That's a registered Tiffany.
moving through here, so, you know, voices get lifted, right? And
Yeah.
they're in those rafters, so. Anybody else? It was interesting, just listening to Izzy talk about, that idea of, and going to Molly's thoughts. We don't do anything that is going to, we might do things for ourselves that move us, but if we're going to move others, and if we're gonna move the world, we have to do that in partnership. You know, I'm looking at Robin, who, you know, we've been together for over 30 years as teachers and friends and family, like the lives that we've lived here, and we talk completely different subjects, and yet the amount of time that we would spend talking about kids, whether it was an individual kid, or whether it was about the culture of the school, or whether it was about how do we get people to see this, and how do we make this a better place, was ongoing. It wasn't like we made it a better place and then, okay, that year, that was great, 1995, cool, let's move on. It was constant conversations that we then took back to our classrooms, and you know, I think did good work. We did good work, and we continue to do good work. So just with different kids, and you know, they're different sizes and different places and things like that. So
Different adults too.
and different adults too. That's right, different adults too.
We're gonna, thank you, and there'll be more. We're gonna have some tea and some gluten-free cookies.
Yes.
At 65 Delancey Street this morning, next door. But before I make a few announcements, a round of applause. We run a slim operation here at Faithless Works, so we do passive play any little amount. Oh, Kathy also has some copies of Undressing the World available over here. We'd love to see them all go to Loving Homes today, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, donations made will go towards the hub.
Yeah, what I'm gonna do is, I'd like them to disappear off that piano, and if I don't see them, I'm going to give a donation to the hub, for those books.
Thank you.
So, thank you everyone.
Please take a look.
Take a look, even if you have like 85 copies, no, don't say that. Marina and Izzy are like, how many copies do we have?
27.
Yes. So we have a few things coming up I'd like to talk about briefly.
You want to hear?
Yes.
Come on here, we want to hear you, and then you can play the piano for a little bit. No, I'm just kidding.
No need to subject you because the back is okay. So this month is April. We have our community. For those who don't know, we have community potlucks here hosted by the Hub and Nuvo congregation. this month's potluck is on the 24th of April. There's also our annual community Seder. If you're good at singing, please come.
And if you're bad at singing, you can sit on one and come.
It's okay, we're gonna, yeah, please just come. This is a beautiful, Molly and our colleague Holly prepare a beautiful Haggadah every year.
And you'll learn one of the coolest stories on earth, really truly coolest stories on earth, how God manipulated Pharaoh.
Yeah. And, you know, we have plenty of pharaohs to deal with,
Yeah.
so we need all the advice and help. So that's on the 24th. The 27th is the last in this first season of Music in the Oranges, which is a new music concert series. We're trying to build some venues in Orange, so
Community concerts for peace and love. And
Yes.
so this is the third in the series, as Doug mentioned. And it's free.
And it's here.
It's here, yeah, in this space. So the acoustics are great, and it's going to be really wonderful. It's a tribute to the music of Nat King Cole. And there are many wonderful musicians that live in this area, as most of you know, I'm sure. But they don't play with each other or see each other necessarily unless they're traveling in Europe or in New York or wherever. And so I saw a friend of mine a few months back, and he's a musician, and we got together with a few people, and he was able to make connections. And so we're doing the third one, and we're going to do another series next, probably in the fall. Great turnout and just wonderful performances. So if you're around on the 27th.
I have a really urgent question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't come on the 27th, but I really need to know how, when they started petting, did the talcum get on his vest? So could you inquire about that for me?
How
How did the talcum get on his vest? You have to ask the singer. How did that happen? And get back to me.
Yes, okay, yes, of course.
Will you do that?
I get it.
It was really, that was
Right,
crazy.
I know the song.
And this concert, in addition to the Nat King Cole theme, will also feature Joshua Nelson
Yes,
singing the music of Mahalia Jackson.
yeah,
It's like low-key, actually, the reason to come.
he's amazing.
No, the talcum on the vest is really.
Anyway, so that's April 27th. May, there's a bunch of stuff happening. We have our annual flower communion here for our service. So that same weekend, Mother's Day weekend, is Music City Festival, organized by our partners, University of Orange and the Music City program, which is a 3-day public celebration of music in the city of Orange. It's Mother's Day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Happens to be in partnership with Orange's very best eateries, so good weekend for eating well. And then June,
Just in May, also the 15th, we have a screening of the Thomas Edison Film Festival. So formerly, it's also with the potluck dinners.
Yep.
Formerly Black Mariah Film Festival, now Thomas Edison.
So that's right. And then June 1st, we celebrate Kathy's book launch here, Curve of Things. It's in the afternoon, right?
Yes, 2 to 5.
2 to 5. Right here. And then June 8th, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Mindy's book, Root Shock, with a 3-day celebration online at the Orange Public Library, here at the Hub, and on Main Street.
And part of the celebration is the June 9th Faith Plus Works, where Darcy Hall is going to talk about wonderful things in Orange.
So,
I just want to let you know that Lynn said thank you so much for the opportunity to share with those that can't be there physically, to be part of this community experience. I'm grateful there are so many ways to build and live in community today. Gratitude, Ysi and Kat. And then Jamie and Margot said thank you so much for your inspirational presentation. I love your poetry, and thank you so much for showing us how important and essential poetry is to our lives. I'd like to share comments, because you know, we don't see you.
Yeah,
It's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
so So the last two things, one is for folks who want to stay up to date about some of the work that's happening in Orange, both from our various organizations and partner organizations. If you want to leave an email address with me, this once a week newsletter. And then the last thing, especially for our Faith Plus Works congregation members, have been Mona Smith's been very, very ill. Mona.
Oh.
So whether it's prayer or meditation or phone calls or house visits, please keep her in mind this week. I didn't prepare closing works, but maybe one of our poets has a last poem that you'd want to take us out.
Okay, I probably can. Let's see, what do I have here?
Kathy, can you read
Oh.
the church law?
Church raffle?
Church raffle.
All right, I'll read church raffle.
Thanks, Stephanie. Sorry, I really
no worries.
put you on the spot.
No. Figured I had something at my, that's okay. It's here, so here we go, I'll find it.
I mean, it's in one of those books.
Oh, duh. I got so into being cool that I forgot it's actually in here. Alright. Okay, so, church raffle. This actually, again, talk about journeys, right? So, this was the very first poem that was published. It was published in the Patterson Literary Review back in 1999. And then I had a drought. You know what, I always think it's farther back, and it's not. It's actually, you would think I would know. See, this is what I mean. I write poems. I don't write books. There it is. Okay. Church raffle. We were the only ones in the neighborhood to ever win a car. You played the church raffle for years as an obligation to the Sacred Heart. So long, in fact, you forgot that winning was a possibility. You were simply hoping God would remember you when you got to the gate. Oh, you're Johnny. Well, I see you always bought a raffle ticket. You figured any positive deed would help your chances. The dark green Oldsmobile was your just reward on earth. Waxed weekly with shined chrome, it was a sign of wealth we didn't have. But we could pretend as you took us for rides through Branchbrook Park, moving as slowly as you could get away with, allowing time to be admired. And us kids, tumbling in the wide back seat, would settle down and prepare ourselves for the tunnel of love, you said. When you and Mom kissed, and then we had our turns, kissing each of you eagerly before returning to the rough and fearless play that usually left satisfying welts and bruises worn like warrior tattoos. That Sunday morning, 7 years later, you stood on the front porch like Gatsby, gazing at the green light across the bay, dressed for church, complete with hat, but without a car. You swore you parked across the street in front of the Murphys under the street light, but it wasn't there. You walked up and down Alexander Street, just in case you forgot, since you had a few beers at Cryans on Saturday afternoon on your way home from work. The car was gone though, stolen. The cops said to chalk it up. Chances were the chop shop already divvied up the prize, so just send in the insurance claim. You sat on that porch all afternoon, in your church suit, hat off, scratching and rubbing your bald head like a crystal ball, making some wish. By dinner, you recovered, teasing Mom, telling stories and spinning philosophies. Easy come, easy go, you said, assuming that God gives and he takes away. But I'm still wondering what hinted judgment did he give you by taking that graceful Oldsmobile and replacing it with that oil slick of a Chevy Vega. I've always worried about your entrance into heaven and God's sense of humor.
That's good.
Okay, see you next talk.
Let's go set up.